everyone, and welcome back to 2010, A Critical Race Theory Odyssey, Part 3. Because this is a long one. That's what she said. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all having a good Sunday so far, and have had a good week overall. Yes, we are back again, continuing on with our look at a panel discussion from circa 2010 from Oregon State University regarding critical race theory, specifically to see what has changed, if anything, in the absence of more current events such as Black Lives Matter and the 1619 Project and George Floyd and a raft of other things that occurred after 2010 that have fueled the critical race theory push over the last several years. It's been interesting so far. A lot of things that are conceptually old hat by now, I suppose. And yes, that was an intentional joke for those of you that watched the previous episode, as we see here with Professor Santa Claus. But I am told by reliable sources that as we proceed through this, once we get to question time from the audience, things really get cooking. And I'm looking forward to that. Maybe we'll hit that today. I couldn't tell you on the basis of timing, but I will continue doing parts on this until we are through. That all being said, who is joining me on this wonderful Sunday morning? Why, that would be some ammunition. Matt Barnes, Ivor Singatorex, Zalbla, Jamie Melquist, Dr. Keeve, let's see, Brigid, Birgid, Portmanteau, Sonic Dreams, Patrice Ripley, the Asia Research Directorate, ARC 210. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Scanner Daftly, and anyone else who joins in the proceeding minutes. Yes, that's what I mean. No name. Hello. All right, so we left off with Professor Santa Claus here, who was explaining to us how color blindness is a literal term. It's not a statement of principle. It's not a sort of value system you hold in not assessing people on the basis of skin color. It's literally, I am making a declaration. I cannot see this person's skin color. Therefore, I'm a better person, because that's what that means. I have backed up a little bit. I can't remember how far, so some of this might be repetitive to the previous, but in the overlap, we will refresh ourselves with our current speaker. I believe he is the next to last speaker, so hopefully we get to the discussion part shortly. But then, given how long these professors have decided to drone on for themselves, my hopes are thin. All that being said, I'll start off with a few seconds here for sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear this, and then we will proceed.
Is there a problem with the concept of I don't see color? You hear that a lot in Eugene. I don't see color.
I don't see color. Yes, you hear that a lot in Eugene. I don't see color. Mike Savage, Blarg. Seftus Wolf. Let's see. Color. Andrew Joyner. Yeah, okay. You put the U in there. You put the U in color, it means you're a communist. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. That's the way I was raised. It's like, check with a Q or curb with a K. And I just, no, it's wrong. It's against God's plan. J.D. Melquist says thumbs up. I can hear that, says no name. All right. Well, let's continue with Professor Santa Claus.
I don't see color. Cut people, they bleed red.
Yes.
We're all members of one race, the human race.
Mm-hmm.
And perspectives that we've had for a number of years, I won't say I've had for a number of years, is when we do that, we disenfranchise people.
Right. And as I said last time, because I did review this a little bit, thinking of people as unified under a common humanity is disenfranchising people.
Because you never hear anybody say, oh, I don't see gender.
That's where we left off last time. You don't see gender. Yeah, because gender can actually determine, or at least give a reasonable expectation for difference in people because of sexual dimorphism and just observable reality, whereas skin color says nothing. It is meaningless. You ever done a character creation thing on a video game? Like Dragon Age or Knights of the Old Republic or something. And you know how no matter what face you pick, no matter what gender you choose, no matter what skin color you decide to go with, the stats don't change. The capability and the potential for the character you're going to play is the same across the board because those things are cosmetic. They don't determine anything about potential necessarily. It just doesn't. So you're right. I don't see gender because gender could actually matter in things, depending.
You don't ever hear that.
Yeah.
And so I think that one of the things that happens when we say to someone, sometimes quite well-meaningly, I don't see color when I look at you, we're denying some aspect of that person's humanity.
No. No, you're not. You are absolutely not. But hey, you go with your bad self.
So that's an interesting aspect I think that'd be fun for us to banter about.
Would it be fun to banter about? What's there to banter about? You've already told us what the truth is. You've already told us that to look past or not consider color in assessing someone is to consider that person less than human. I'm not quite sure what there is to banter about when you've taken that position.
One of my friends who used to live in LA County said, Tim, it's easy to be liberal in the suburbs. That's quite often how I feel at the U of O and in Eugene.
So are you liberal in the urbs?
Eugene is the meeting place for two pretty opposite perspectives. You'll hear this from students quite a bit. For some students, this is the most diverse place they'll ever live in their lives. For other students, it's, boy, there's a lot of white folks here.
Yeah. Golly. Well, maybe they're right. I don't know. So are you saying that liberals in Eugene are just posers? I suppose that's possible.
And those worlds collide because they're both true. They're both true for the people for whom those statements are said.
Oh, so individuals can have individual perspectives that are true for them and not necessarily invalid? Wow, okay. Golly, I'm learning so much.
And so one of the interesting things that happens here, I think, is you have folks saying it hasn't been very long since Brown versus Board of Education. And then you have other folks say it's been way too long and we ought to be a lot further along.
Given the fact that affinity groups and racial segregation in classrooms is taking place right now in schools across this country, it does seem like Brown versus Board of Education is a long, long, long time ago, doesn't it? A little bit.
It's already been mentioned about Peggy McIntosh, and if you haven't gotten into that stuff, I would encourage you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about this notion of privilege, my dad was a high school principal.
Oh.
And I grew up pretty privileged, and I didn't realize that at the time, but now in retrospect, I realize it quite a bit.
So everything that has amounted to your position on this table and as a professor is invalid, right? I mean, you were privileged. You didn't actually earn any of this, correct? You're going to go there, correct? Because you believe in what you say, correct?
That one of the things I was afforded were books in my home and the just expectation I'd go to college. He was disappointed in me as an undergraduate student, and I probably should have been, but I wasn't. But that was back in the day where you could get into grad school with a fairly mediocre GPA. Y'all can't do that. And so I hope that you're studying hard.
You can't get into grad school with a mediocre GPA these days? Really? Have I got news for you?
I'm glad you're out here tonight. But if we think about this notion of whiteness, we think about this notion of privilege. One of the things that has informed me in my thinking, in addition to Peggy McIntosh's work, is the work of Chris Cullinan, who's on our campus and works in human resources and presents quite a bit all across the country.
Does he talk about the color of Band-Aids and how that's a reflection of white privilege? Because that was the high point for me of Peggy McIntosh's The Invisible Knapsack, is the list of privileges. Specifically the Band-Aids one, but also how often she uses weasel words like can be pretty much assured or mostly or, etc. You can talk more about the accuracy of Peggy McIntosh's work.
And she's got a wonderful model, I think, for privilege that's on the handout that I gave you. And she says that when we're talking about privilege, she said there are three concepts that come to mind.
Mhm.
There's this concept of innocence,
Yeah.
worthiness,
Okay.
and competence.
Okay.
That if I come from a group that's privileged, and that could be white folks, it could be being male, it could be being from another group that might be considered privileged.
What group might that be? What group? Not demographic, mind you, but group. You know, like the Elks Club. Now, what group do you mean? White, male. You didn't go straight. I was surprised you didn't go straight, because that's usually the Holy Trinity. But okay, what group? You just can't think of one right now? Okay.
When we walk into situations, we can say, gosh, I didn't know that.
What?
I didn't know Imus said those nasty things.
Wow. Okay. Yes. Okay. This is 2010. Okay. So Don Imus, former, relatively famous radio broadcaster, sort of a quasi Howard Stern of his day, sort of kind of controversial. He said several things on the radio that got him in trouble in the latter years of his life. So if I'm white, I have the privilege of not knowing things like Don Imus. What was it? Okay, well, maybe I've forgotten. Maybe it's my privilege that has caused me to forgotten the exact phrase he used. But I do remember he was commenting on the girls' basketball team of somewhere. Oh, nappy-headed hose. That's the phrase he used. He used nappy-headed hose to describe, I think it was a girls' basketball team or something somewhere. And he got in deep trouble for that. So, yeah. Of course, if you were white in America, you had no idea that was going on, even though it was on every national news media for weeks. And he had to meet with, I think he met with Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton or something after that. He did a whole mea culpa tour on the radio after that. And just me reminiscing about the past.
Anybody see Gwen Ifill on Meet the Press a couple weeks ago? If you haven't, go Google that and YouTube that and see her little snippet where she takes Tim Russert to task. It's brilliant stuff, and you've never seen Tim squirm. And I like Tim Russert, but you've never seen him squirm like Gwen Ifill made him squirm.
Oh, and watching people squirm is great, right? Yeah, we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yeah, Tim Russert. Tim Russert was a good guy. He died of like cancer or something relatively early. Yeah.
In that conversation.
Yeah, you like seeing him squirm.
Presumption of innocence. There's presumption of worthiness.
Uh-huh.
In staff meetings, I'm assuming that people are going to listen to what I say.
Well, see, I can't really help myself but listen to what you say, but I have a feeling if I was a student in your class, I'd be droning you out in about, 5 minutes of listening to you. But that's just me, regardless of your skin color.
I've got a PhD, been in higher ed 30 years. Darn right, people better listen to what I say.
Yeah, except that all of those things are invalid, right? Because you earn them under privilege, not under merit, right? The myth of worthiness, you don't actually possess those things. You just think you do. I'm curious to know if he's at all going to acknowledge within his own reality the invalidity of himself.
And I have colleagues with those same credentials, same expertise, and same meetings they may not be listened to. So worthiness, competence, and innocence.
They may not be listened to. Yes, you are a disciple of Peggy McIntosh. You are. You have to put in that exception, because you cannot say with any credibility that any of what you're talking about are actually the rules of the universe, because you know they are not. May, might, maybe, pretty often, etc. Whoops. I clicked on the wrong thing because the chat moved. But hey, dog backwards, E. 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 Thank you, Matt Barnes. Wait, did Professor Santa Claus say something? I know, right? Because I saw him and I just immediately knew I had to listen to him. Actually, it was more morbid curiosity about where that haircut came from. But hey, whatever works, right? Thank you, Matt Barnes.
Not only am I worthy of you listening to me, I am competent in what I say.
That is up for debate. That is up for debate after I have listened to what you have to say. And so far, at least on the subject of color blindness, you are not competent in what you have to say. Totally and absolutely incompetent on what you have to say. But you see, this is the thing. I take on people for who they are and what they have to say, not on the basis of what they look like. Unlike you, apparently, who sees the world that way and assumes the worst of people in the one sense and assumes the victimhood of the other people in the other sense. Because you know better.
And I think that those are great examples of things that we just need to be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we can give up privilege. Just Tim Wise does great workshops, and he came on campus a couple years ago, and somebody said, so what should I do if I'm privileged? Can I give up my privilege? He said, no. Your obligation is to be aware of that privilege and use it for the betterment of humankind, however you choose to do that. So.
Yes, original sin, the indelible stain of your lowly origins. You can never get rid of it. All you can do is beg forgiveness forever. So I wonder how our speaker is using his privilege, the privilege of the credentials he possesses, which he obviously did not actually earn, but were mostly handed to him because of his skin color. I wonder how he's using those things to help others.
Just some thoughts for us to wrestle with.
Okay. Oh, you're done? Okay, good.
I'm Cynthia Carlson.
Hi, Cynthia.
I am a double duck. I graduated in 1974 with a psychology major, and I went to law school here as well.
Psychology and law. All righty.
And I can also proudly proclaim that my two children have gone to the University of Oregon. The last of the two is about to graduate this spring. So
yay!
Go Ducks!
Go Ducks! Yeah, Ducks!
I'd be interested in knowing how many of you in the audience are students currently. If you could just raise your hand. And anybody from the community? And any staff, faculty? Great.
Yeah, didn't we see that when the camera panned over before there was very few people here? I'm vaguely remembering this. Let's see. Oh, Old Guy Gamer. Good morning, Old Guy Gamer.
I appreciate you being here also. And I really am thrilled to be included in this impressive panel. And I came here because, I don't think because I had so much to share, but because I have so much still to learn. And I have learned new things tonight.
What have you learned tonight? I'd be curious to know. What have you learned tonight? What is revelatory to you? If you're as seasoned an educator as I can only assume you are.
And I guess my perspective comes from being a member of this community. I've lived in Eugene since 1970.
Okay.
I grew up in Salem.
Uh-oh. Oh, wait, not that Salem. Never mind. Never mind.
So I'm a Oregon-born.
Mm-hmm. Would you call yourself a native? Or is that not allowed?
Member of this community.
Yes.
And don't have much experience with anything else.
Oh, okay.
In terms of diversity, certainly not. It's interesting when I look back at my high school yearbooks from McNary High School in what is now Kaiser, Oregon. I'm surprised to see how many students of color there were in my class that they were invisible to me when I was in school because we didn't associate together.
Oh, okay. Well, so that means that every white student in your class you associated with and knew. I mean, that's the obvious truth to it, right? You associated with every student that was white. That's the only way that people who were not white were invisible to you. And that makes any sense at all. Right?
I have had the privilege of not having to think about race my entire life.
Is that really a privilege? I mean, are you to be held to account for interactions that you just did not have because of the circumstances you grew up in? You know, is a child in, let's say, China, who has known only Chinese people their entire life, right? Is that a privilege? Or are they somehow deficient in some way because of those circumstances? I'm always curious to know how this plays out. Thank you, Mr. Tickletrunk. Hello, Scribbles. Hello, Mr. Tickletrunk. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. We're all in our places with bright, shiny faces. I think that's how that goes. Maybe, kind of, sort of. And thank you again, Mr. Tickletrunk, for the dancing. How's it going, Dog Cat Fox? I don't know. How's it going? Wowie, wow, wow. I guess it's going okay. Dog Cat Fox says hello. At least I think that's hello. He may have just threatened me. I can't tell anymore.
Not my issue.
Yeah.
You know, felt bad for people that had to be dealing on a daily basis with being targeted by racism, discrimination. But I always assumed goodness in myself. One of those well-intended people who don't use pejorative words, who wish no ill to anyone, and
so wait, you grew up being nice to people. You grew up being friendly and polite, and that is an artifact of inherent wickedness or ignorance or internalized white supremacy. You now associate the way you behave towards others with being attached to your skin color. I mean, I can only assume that's where this is going.
Have only learned in probably the last 10 years or so that doesn't make me good.
Yeah, I thought I was a good person. I mean, I treated everyone with respect. I tried not to be mean. I didn't use bad words. I didn't call people names. But only recently did I find out that doesn't mean I'm a good person. If it wasn't funny, sort of in a sobbing clown kind of way, I might feel kind of bad for our speaker that she had to be taught how flawed she really is. Thank you, Matt Barnes. Dr. Lawyer is a proto-Robin DiAngelo. Quote, I've been racist, therefore all whites are racist. I guess that, but also I did a video, if you can believe it, I did a video a couple of years ago that was from an NBC sort of like subheading or something. Anyway, there was this literal support group for white people to learn about their privilege. And it was mostly made up of, or at least the ones that they profiled were mostly elderly people who were like, I worked hard my entire life in a blue collar job and everything, but I didn't know how privileged I was. Just normal people that have somebody swoop in to tell them, oh, by the way, you're actually a bad person and have to seek forgiveness forever, regardless, because of your skin color. And our speaker here is apparently in that category. Thank you, Gunfox61. To the panel, why should I listen to you other than complaining about made-up bull? What have you actually done for the nation? Nothing. Okay, got it. That's one of my overarching questions about critical race theory, about Black Lives Matter, about 1619, and on and on and on. How have any of these things, these movements, these initiatives, and so on, how have any of these things improved race relations? If the stated goal is to do away with racial division, if the stated goal is to increase racial equality and so on, okay, I mean, these initiatives, these philosophies, these curricula have been around for many years now. So what tangible results can be shown to us that progress is being made as a direct result of these things? Because that is the goal, isn't it? That we get to a point where we're not as racist a country as we were where race is less of a factor of assessment in people. The laws that are already on the books are actually being put into practice as they should be. That point I'm open to argument on, because, laws are only as good as the people that end up enforcing them. But otherwise, what actually has been gained from any of this? What is this lady deprecating herself, being told that she needs to? How has that helped anybody in any way?
That I have inherited a legacy of every institution in this country being designed and made to work for people who look like me.
Yes, original sin. Yeah, I'm familiar with the concept.
And if I do nothing, if I'm just this benign, gee, isn't that terrible, wish it wasn't so type person moving through the world.
If you weren't just being the kind of change you want to see and treating people nicely and, doing as you would have others do to you, golden rule kind of thing. Yeah, that's terrible. How dare you only do that?
The system won't change. So there are, it's a new way for me to think about racism.
It's a new way to think of yourself as a wretched creature. But okay, what then, with this revelation, have you done to change the system? I mean, what actively are you doing? Have you done? I don't know. How have you altered a cog in the grand machine thanks to this new knowledge you have of your own internal terribleness? I'd be curious to know.
One being the racism of an individual or held by an individual, the biases or prejudice against people who are the other. And the other notion, which is more recent to me, of the idea of institutional racism.
More recent to you, institutional racism, right, at Oregon State University, I assume, which you and your sons are all benefiting from. So why did you put your sons in this school? Why do you continue to have your sons in this school? Why are any of you at all associated with Oregon State University? Because of its internal and inherent institutionalized racism, of which you are a part. How far are you willing to take this knowledge of yours and actually act on it? Are you going to give up your paychecks? Give up your tenure if you possess it? I mean, why would you want to at all be associated with something so terrible and evil? Thank you again, Gunfox. Scribe, to answer your question, it has done nothing but divide people based on race and promote victimization. To me, it seems they want the 1960s. I'm not sure what they want, because a lot of the things that are being advocated for, and Satsu brings this up all the time, if you took all the goals of modern racial justice, at least the most, vociferous ones, and you compare that with the goals of your standard KKK guy from the 1950s and 60s, right? Well, we want the races to be separated. We want the races to be denoted basically on their race. We want everyone to be categorized by race and valued by race. I mean, I hear valuation by race by TEDx speakers all the time. I see affinity groups being promoted in schools all the time. What is the difference between these two philosophies? I don't know. But they don't want to go back to the 60s because the 60s were bad. Fire hoses and police dogs. It is such a, pardon my French, mindfuck to have this a level of cognitive dissonance in what is being promoted and what I'm being told the goal is meant to be achieved by it. Yeah, this is what fascinates me about the whole thing, is to see very old, very bad ideas repackaged into something saintly or virtuous, or, I don't know, by this shall I seek my penance. I will categorize myself and others on the basis of skin color. Skin color shall be the identity by which we move through the world. It's one might think it's almost crazy.
And how to dismantle or change institutions so that they operate in the same way for everyone. And I think particularly this is driven home for me because I am part of the justice institution.
You are part of the justice institution. You mean you went to school and studied to get a law degree? Okay, so if you're part of the justice institution, what are or what will you do to dismantle and or change said institution?
And it's incredibly important to me
Uh-huh.
that justice mean the same thing for everybody, no matter what race they are identified as having belonged to.
Ideally, yes. In practice, no. And I don't mean just on the basis of skin color, but there is no necessary equal outcome when it comes to criminal justice or even civil justice, because that's why there are these things called parameters, judicial discretion or jury discretion. Two people might commit the same crime, right? First-degree murder. Will both people end up getting the death penalty? Not necessarily, because it's based on circumstances or based on the opinion of the jury at the time or the judge or whatever. Nothing is assured. We strive to have justice in our country be as equal as possible, but there is room to maneuver. There's discretion. And there's also just mistakes, or bad decisions. Because the criminal justice system is ultimately a reflection of human beings, just like any set of laws or rules or governments and so on. And human beings, in and of themselves, are fallible. But we do the best that we can. But if you want to cite every disparity between justice outcomes as a reflection of racism, sexism, whatever else, then you are practicing the God of the gaps theory of criminal justice. But again, it comes down, funnily enough, to a case-by-case basis.
And so I feel an extra responsibility, not just because of the color of my skin, but because of the position I hold, both of which give me incredible privilege.
You feel a sense of responsibility because of the color of your skin. The color of your skin gives you privilege. You believe these things to be true. Okay, so you believe in the power of skin color. You believe in white power. Got it.
And so I feel that in order to still consider myself to be a good person, I need to proactively do something. I need to be aware. I need to learn. I need to speak up. I need to take action. And if I don't, then I'm part of the problem.
Do you believe that, or is that what you were told? Because just a few minutes ago, you told us that throughout your entire life, you just acted like a good person. You were nice to people. You didn't use bad language and on and on. But then you were told that that wasn't enough, that you weren't good enough, that there's all these extra layers of flaw within you or without you, as the case may be, that you have to apologize for, make penance for, have to act on, and so on. Really? Do you know this? Or are you buying into this?
So I like the notion, I agree with the notion that white folks shouldn't feel guilty about being white.
Do you? Do you really agree with that notion? Because sure doesn't sound like it. Sure doesn't sound like it if your skin color bestows upon you a responsibility and a privilege simply for possessing it. What do you think about the homeless white person? What do you imagine that person has as far as privilege or responsibility on the basis of their skin color? I wonder.
It's not that we have no value. I think I like to think in terms of the notion that we are not responsible for history, but we're responsible to history.
We, as in all white people, we all possess a common sin of skin. Oh, do we?
And whatever guilt may be generated,
Uh-huh.
the notion of discovering that whiteness isn't such a benign thing.
Whiteness is not a benign thing. So simply the color of your skin, what? It metastasizes? Your skin is actually malicious.
That in order to continue to feel positively about myself, I need to do something to change.
That really says something about your own self-image than anything else. It really does. I mean, like I said, if it wasn't sort of clown cryingly funny, this would be kind of sad to listen to this lady who has, as far as, and again, just taking her word at it, she lived the bulk of her life just living her life, raising her family, being a nice person, being conscientious. And then somebody came along and made her feel bad about herself. Someone came along and told her that she's been forever stained her whole life and now has to spend the rest of it feeling bad about herself, feeling guilty about her quote unquote blindness in all the years prior to this revelation. It really is kind of sad to see this happen. You can't just be a good person. No, no, no. You have to seek forgiveness for what you are forever.
The status quo. I would really love to be able to go back to college and take classes that are available to you as students today. They may have been available. I wasn't aware of it, didn't concern me, didn't interest me, didn't make it onto my radar screen when I was in school here as an undergraduate.
Because you were white or because you just weren't interested? And is not being interested in something therefore a sin? If a student today also chooses or does not pay attention to whatever classes you're talking about, does that make them a bad person?
I think gender was much more of a live issue for me because obviously in terms of privilege, men had more privilege than women.
Oh, really? Wow. Back in the, whatever, 60s and 70s and everything that you were going to school, if you can believe it, the sexual revolution was taking place. Wow. I imagine that. An actual thing that was happening. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Andrew Joyner. Well, as long as they're assuaging some of that white guilt, it's all pretty performative and not really helping anyone, though. And again, how is any of this self-introspection, this self-flagellation, how is any of this helping anyone else? In doing this to herself, in encouraging this in others, how has the system changed? How has the institution improved? I would love to know. You would think they would have something to say on that. Maybe we'll get that at question time. I can only hope. But thank you, Andrew.
When I was in law school, 25% of the students were women and the rest men.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think it's over 50% are women in the University of Oregon School of Law. So there's been a lot of change. I've been able to see that.
Wow. You mean functional equality? Well, how is that possible? Because all I'm ever told and all I've been told since I've been doing YouTube and before is just the rampant dominance of men and the inability of them to allow anybody else into their spaces. 50% of the law students at Oregon State University are women? I mean, wow. Back in 2010 even. Okay. So I guess you can't say that there's institutionalized sexism then, right?
Occur and more easily identify with that.
Uh-huh.
In terms of a social justice issue.
Uh-huh.
I am involved in community efforts to have those important conversations. Study circles on racism.
Study circles on racism. Okay.
A group of folks have put together a discussion guide and are inviting people from all parts of the community and people who belong to and exercise power in institutions to take part in study circles on racism. It's a 6-week endeavor. They meet for 2 hours per week and they are facilitated by trained facilitators, and I do the training along with Dr. Phyllis Lee for people to facilitate those conversations. And
facilitate those conversations. 2 hours a week, 6-week program. Please expand on that. I would love to know what one of those conversations looks like.
And those can lead to incredible change for individuals.
Yeah, like someone going their whole life just thinking that being a nice person is a good deal, and then being told they're terrible, and then becoming a evangelist for that same way of thinking to others. Maybe.
I very much liked the example that was given earlier about how the experience of men and women can be so different even when you're living together in a close-knit family unit.
Can you believe it? Men and women operate differently. Different people have different ways of looking at the world. Oh my gosh. Am I looking into the lost ark? Because I think my mind is melting.
I think that for the people of color who participate in the study circles on racism, they read the materials and they sometimes in feedback say, there's nothing new here. we know all this stuff.
Yes, because your skin color denotes the kind of knowledge you possess. Obviously.
Yet the European Americans in the group are, I really liked and admired Molly Ivins, and she used the word gobsmacked. And that's a really great word. It's one of these kind of moments.
The European Americans in the group. Are you a European American? Because I seem to recall that you were born in Salem, Oregon. Is that how you classify white people, as European Americans? Huh. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So a circle on racism from you, as you've already described your perspective on it, which is, as far as I can tell, educating white people on their responsibility based on their skin color and their privilege, which they obviously possess and which they have no way of getting away from, have to take some sort of, accounting for what they don't know that they're doing to people of color? Oh, sorry, the European Americans. And that's a revelation to them, kind of like it was to you. I thought I was just a good person. Now I know I'm terrible. Okay.
And it's just incredible to the people of color in the room. How could they not know? How could they not understand what we experience on a daily basis?
Like what? Like what? I don't know what you mean. You're going to have to give me some examples. Yeah, so white people are all ignorant of the concept of racism. Or is it white people, European Americans have no idea what it's like to be discriminated against on the basis of their skin color? Well, golly, you know what they need? They need to watch a panel discussion from Oregon State University from 2010. Then they can be right up there with everybody else.
So I think that there's some usefulness in having those conversations with the hope that people will then be able to figure out ways to work together to change and become active in dismantling racism within institutions and in other contexts.
How? We were just told that you can't get rid of privilege. You conceivably can't get rid of your skin color, barring some massive surgery or tattooing or something. How do you get rid of what is inherent to white people? And on the other side of things, let's just say for the sake of argument that you're walking down the street and someone who believes as you do sees you and they think of you the way that you say we should think of European Americans. But they have absolutely no idea, because they're not mind readers, just how sorry you are to be white, that you are not only a nice person, but also one of the good ones. All right. What if they assess you just instantly as part of the problem and then move along in their way, not even bothering to engage you? Why should they? They already know what you are. They already have a measure of the kind of person you are. And they go through the rest of their life knowing that you're part of the problem. Are they wrong? Has anything changed? Has anything improved? You tell me.
So I'm here to be a part of the community and kind of how some of this plays out in my life experience. And I'd be happy to talk to folks or respond to questions if any occur to you. I would like to say too that it's important to acknowledge history. And
are we about to do a land acknowledgement?
It's important to acknowledge everybody's history. And I was recently privileged to be.
You are what? Is that something to actually be proud of now?
Part of a group of people who established a memorial at the Holt Center for the Performing Arts, which is a location in World War II where Japanese Americans were required to report to register prior to being transported to internment camps during World War II. And kind of interestingly, most of the ones affected in this area were students at the University of Oregon.
Well, then, again, why are you associated with such a racist institution? I don't understand.
That had to leave or be interned. So that's a way of remembering that history and teaching people. And it's not a period of history that I knew anything about from all of the education I got from first grade through graduating from law school. I didn't know anything about that.
You didn't know anything about the Japanese internment camps? Or you didn't know anything about very specific sites and or locations and or places, etc., regarding it? Because that's some next level research you would have to elect to do. Is that a failing on the school's part? Because, I mean, if I don't know the granular minutia of a historical event, does that make me a bad person? You know, ignorance does not necessarily equate to evil. Just not knowing something, right? There's nothing new under the sun except the history you don't know. Okay, so you learned that there were locations and institutions in your general vicinity that have connections to bad events of the past. Okay. And you didn't know that prior, and the school didn't teach you. Well, obviously they were keeping that information from you. Obviously it's a big conspiracy to keep you in the dark. Even though all of this information was readily available, has not gone down the memory hole, and so on. Now, remembering that these things happened, finding out new things about the places you grew up in and their connection to the past, perfectly fine. Remembering the past so that we do not repeat it, great. But now you're what? Indicting the school for malicious intent? Or you're indicting yourself simply for not knowing something? Is that it?
So I'm kind of falling awake at a later moment in life than I wish. And I feel like I'm playing a lot of catch up. That's why I asked to go last.
Falling awake. Now, here's the thing. I don't know when the mantra of get woke was actually founded or first came to prevalence. It was somewhere in this territory. I think it was the early 2000s, if I remember right. This came up on Twitter not too long ago, where there was a discussion I had with somebody who thought that get woke was something made up by conservatives or the right wing to make fun of the left wing, when in fact, get woke was a phrase created by and promoted by social activists themselves, and has now kind of turned around to become a sort of mocking term. It's kind of the reverse of the Big Bang. The phrase "the Big Bang" was actually coined to make fun of the theory of the Big Bang, or the singularity theory or whatever. But then it became turned around into becoming kind of the catchphrase for it. So I wonder if falling awake was the proto get woke here.
So I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that you're having an opportunity to think about these things at this point in your lives.
Are you glad to be here, though? Because everything I've heard so far makes it sound like you are absolutely and totally just, sad, upset about yourself. Your being here is just one more expression from everything that you've said of how you don't like yourself, or you've been made to not like yourself. I kind of see our speaker here as more of a tragic figure than the other ones. Everybody else, maybe save for AJ Pepper, the student, talked with such stridency and confidence and assuredness about what they were doing and everything else, and arrogance, where our speaker here sounds like someone who has been indoctrinated, and she's told us as much. I have a feeling that she's a very nice lady, and that she's been a nice lady her entire life. And then someone came along and instilled her with a guilt complex. And now she thinks she's doing good by passing this guilt complex on to others. It's very, very religious.
Well, I just want to say we started about 5 minutes late, so we've got about 25 minutes for questions.
It's question time. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Okay, now just as a programming note, like the last couple episodes, I have every intention of keeping this to about an hour and a half. That means we have about 40 minutes left of real time for this. But we're at question time. So on the clock, we are at 13 minutes into an hour-long video. We're not going to get through it all. If I do a follow-up to this, I'm going to still keep it to an hour and a half just for consistency's sake. But I want to get through as much question time as we can. However, knowing me, I'll probably take some time in between questions to comment. So I will do my best to try to get as much in as we can and not pause too much. All right, I'll do my best, but you never know what's going to be said next, so we'll see.
And we've got a lot of people nodding tonight. I just want to make sure that we have a chance to get everybody's questions in. So I just ask that if you could be succinct with your statements or your questions, we'd appreciate it. And feel free to
look at that audience.
Ask a question to the entire panel or individual panelists.
All right.
And I'm going to hand this off to the first person. From there, I'll just let you hand it away. So we'd like that.
You need to hold the mic to your mouth, dude. Okay. All right.
As opposed to asking you a question, I kind of wanted to touch base on what you said, Dr. Rosiak, and in regards to what you said was, if you look in any history textbook, you can see that we all share the same blood from the thing. And I think, metaphorically speaking, our blood within history textbooks is actually constructed to the contrary.
What?
In the sense that we are idealized as favoring white Western conceptualizations of history. And so our in turn, our textbooks extract vital information from what, as students, we need to learn. And that in turn retreats back to what you were saying, as from elementary school, progressively, you had absolutely no idea of different identities and what they constituted. And for that reason, I think that the implications of the extraction of this in textbooks within primary education is clearly the perpetuation of the hegemony, and in turn what we construct as normative ideals of whiteness. And that's just what I wanted to say.
Excuse me a moment, won't you? I have no idea how to follow that up.
I agree. I think what
I agree. With what?
wanted to say, when I wrote down whether I said it or not, was any decent history textbook, but my criteria for decent would be probably not the average history textbook.
Sure.
More like Howard Zinn's People's History, which gets used in some history classes, but not most.
Right.
So yes, I mean, you're right. I was mainly making the point that if we're going to talk about whiteness and constructions of race, and white people respond by staying in the place where they're shocked by the scope of what we don't know, then we're not really going very far.
Shocked by the scope of what they don't know. What? So the only white person that could be valid is one who is omniscient? Because I hate to tell you this, Doctor, no person on the planet has the ability to not be shocked by what they don't know. Because if you could conceptualize, if there was a way to comprehend the abstract idea of the amount of things one does not know, you would achieve a sort of Lovecraftian, mind-melting, non-Euclidean catastrophe. But maybe I'm just getting away from myself.
And a lot of classes can get, and a lot of people can get stuck there. And I don't consider that I don't consider that a space worth spending a lot of time in.
What?
And so I was trying to make some sort of offhand remark.
What?
But I would never give credit to our current conception of history curriculum, the K-12 levels, for having really any sustained critical content. I think that happens a lot because groups and pockets and individual teachers with a commitment to that kind of critical work to do it. And they often do it at risk to themselves.
What?
So my conception of a decent history class was kind of a rare one.
Okay, I just wanted to comment.
I just wanted to say a bunch of words and things that have no connection to one another. And then, you know what's probably more hilarious is that the student says a bunch of things in criticism of the doctor and what he said. A bunch of things that is just gobbledygook. And then the doctor responds as though she has said something cogent and intelligent. I mean, if she wanted to make a statement to say K through 12 history classes are an insufficient look at the events that have occurred in history and are not a thorough examination of the events and the consequences and the causes and so on. You know what? I would agree with you. That's because K through 12 is really the basics. And you don't spend your entire day just looking at history and the minutia. K through 12 is a general education, general studies. If you want to go into more focused studies, that's what you get a major for in college, or just do it on your own. There's a library. K through 12 education is not sufficient for much else than just getting the basics. So criticizing the history course through K through 12, not exactly a zenith of revelation. I hate to tell you this. Or anything, really, depending on what you decide to do with your life. But are you going to condemn someone for not knowing the history that you care about? That's interesting.
Throw something in that relates to that.
Yeah.
Years ago, I was teaching a diversity, kind of the theory class for student affairs professionals in a master's program. And it went pretty well, but one of the things I realized pretty early on is many of the students in class had no sense of history. So I changed the syllabus, and the first thing they read was Takaki's A Different Mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And then things fell into place. But one of the most telling comments by one of the folks in the program who was a history major as an undergrad, got done reading the book, said, I never learned any of this stuff in my history major. As a major, he never learned any of that stuff. Granted, that was years ago, but it was just so telling.
Well, major of history of what? There's a lot of history out there. I mean, if you spend your life focusing on, I don't know, Chinese history, your knowledge of French history might be a little rusty. I never learned any of this. Can you believe that? As a history major, I never learned any of this. Well, I got to tell you then, man, I want to know how that history major assessed their major. Like all encompassing, the totality of history is to be presented to you in a history major? Really? Okay.
The foundation hadn't been laid. And quite often, if folks do take history, quite often it stops at World War II, or it doesn't even get to the modern day. And history, I think, provides a foundation for all of this.
Right. Well, also the illustration of Native Americans within Texas is absolutely I mean, I have absolutely no idea of the brutality that happened in the past, and that is sequentially fueling the current state of Native Americans. That I have absolutely no idea about it.
Well, you don't have any idea about it, or now you do because you decided to look it up? And was that history hidden from you? Were you disallowed in discovering that for yourself? What do you think any particular class or discipline is supposed to do for you, K through 12, or without your own efforts to go further than an hour class a day or 2 hours a week or anything else? Is that a sin of the educational system that they don't tell you everything? Would you be able to sit still long enough to absorb everything were it actually available? I wasn't told this. Nobody told me this. Okay, well, depending on the circumstances, maybe that's a valid complaint. But all of this information is available to you. But because a class didn't tell you, or because a history major was not all-encompassing of all things, it's bad? I guess it depends.
And I mean, that ill awareness leaves me absolutely confused as to what my identity constitutes as a white individual.
What? Your lack of knowledge, or the lack that the school provided you of the brutality done unto Native Americans, leaves you at a loss as to your identity as a white person. Sorry, what did you have to do with Native American atrocity again? What does that have to do with any? How does Native American atrocity, massacre, mistreatment, whatever, of the past, what does that say about you today? I would love to know the answer to that question from the student.
And so that's just what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm John. I'm from Nigeria. I've been in Oregon for 7 years.
Hi, John.
I haven't applied for citizenship yet, just so you know.
Okay.
I went back home in 2005. Spent a year back home. Now I'm a graduate student.
Yeah.
Public policy.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a predominantly white college, Linfield College, for undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
I could count all the black people on my, 2 hands.
Uh-huh.
Literally, yeah, there were no more than 10.
Oh, okay.
Also, I direct the African Student Association here
Okay.
at the U of O.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a question, or is this just you listing off your resume?
And I just wanted to respond to Du Bois. I'm surprised you read his definition. And I'm concerned as to if you believe what he says.
Ooh, a challenge. A challenge from someone who can't be unchallenged or something, right? Okay.
Because he says that the white race is no race at all, needing no conservation.
Mm-hmm.
Whiteness has no history or future, it's strictly economics.
Mm-hmm.
That is looking at his background and where he's coming from, I think that's more of a reactionary statement. You
think? Because I thought so. That didn't seem like a perspective on actual reality, depending on how you look at it. But okay, so you're challenging Du Bois, who is our gray jacketed professor there in the middle with the beard. That is his Bible. If we listen to, I think that was in what, part 1, part 2? It had to be part 2. Part 2, where we were told, oh no, wait, it was part 1, because they started with him, actually. I take it back. They didn't go down the line in order. They started with him, I think. No, they started. Anyway, we went through in part 1 listening to Gray Jacket tell us chapter and verse practically of how that one book by W.E.B. Du Bois, shapes his entire worldview. Now, the definition of white people that Du Bois espouses, or espoused, I guess, past tense, is being challenged. What will our speaker say?
No thinking individual will say that. And I mean, for example, clear idea. Look at how much reparation the U.S. showed Europe after World War II. I mean, it was beyond rationality. It was definitely a deep solidarity that they were expressing in giving the loans without much interest, and transferring gold across the ocean. So I just wanted to talk about that first. I just mentioned that, and I have a few other things, but I think I'll just talk individually after tonight. So thanks.
Sure. Thanks for bringing that up. It's important that you notice that Du Bois says that whiteness as a race doesn't have a history. In fact, whiteness as a race is a relatively recent construction.
You're going to correct the student on this? Oh boy. Okay. All right.
Something that emerged in the 19th century, late 19th century. And the issue for Du Bois is not that whiteness isn't anything. It's just not a race. It is a particular set of practices.
Whiteness is a set of practices. It is not a race. Okay?
It's a way of living that is highly problematic. I mean, this was what he wants to argue, that in fact, what whiteness ends up doing is taking a particular way of living in the world, which clearly as a way of living has a history.
Yes, there is only one way to live in the world as a white person.
But it's not the same kind of history, he thinks, as the history of, say, African peoples. Or, I mean, from his perspective, he thought that Anglo-Saxons had history, whereas whiteness, that particular category, isn't a race that has a history, but rather a series of practices that leads to a certain kind of domination, leads to a certain kind of relationship that's fostered between races and so forth.
Oh, wait, no. The student's question was, do you actually believe it? You can tell us till the cows come home about what Du Bois espoused. That's fine. If that's your thing, whatever. That's not what the question was. The question was, do you believe in Du Bois's version of reality? Do you believe it? Did you listen to the question?
But it itself isn't the same thing. So it's, in effect, it's a kind of category mistake to think of whiteness as the same thing as blackness or Asianness, whatever that would be.
So black is not a race. Asian is not a race, just like white is not a race. Or white isn't a race, but black is, or how are we supposed to assess these things? But again, more importantly, is this what you believe to be true?
It's actually something else, and the problem is it gets confused with being a race.
Yeah, no, confusion is definitely the watchword here. In your explanation, confusion is where we are at.
And it needs to be criticized as something which is destructive in itself, whereas races he thinks are not. Right. So I might not have been clear about it.
You know, might. Now, there's no might about it. You are not clear about it, but also you are not answering his question, the root of his question. We're not asking for another education of what Du Bois said. He was asking, do you believe in Du Bois's perspective? Do you believe it to be true?
But from his perspective, it's not the same sort of thing that has commonality of family or blood, doesn't have the same kind of commonality of language, doesn't have the same kind of commonality of vision or historical awareness.
So again, black people are a monolith because they're not like white people who have no connection. But white people are in control of everything, are are amenable only to other white people. They all operate in whiteness, unlike black people who... You see why I'm confused? Yeah.
I'll just say one
Yeah.
quick thing. I'm from Africa,
Mhm.
and even within my nation, Nigeria, 150 million people. We don't have commonality of language
Yeah.
and vision.
No,
Yeah. Yeah. You see, hey, professor, just so you know, white people, this is great. This is great. Can you believe it? There's a whole bunch of people in Africa who all look similar, but they're not the same. And look at that. Look at the look on his face right now. Boy, my pause game is on point. He is about to tell this guy, no. I understand that, but so I got to back up just a second or two. This is going to be precious. This is going to be precious.
150 million people. We don't have commonality of language and vision.
no, I didn't say he was right about this notion of race.
Okay,
but
good.
That's the distinction that he wants.
Okay. So Du Bois is wrong, is what we're saying here. You do not believe what Du Bois is putting down. That was the question, Professor.
He holds that there's something valuable about races, and that races need to be understood just as you said, right, in terms of commonalities of these sorts of things.
No. The kid just said that there isn't commonality just because of skin color. That's what he just... Are you listening to what is being said to you?
And he thought that whites didn't share that.
I will say, however, from my studies, that the commonality of the white race, if I'm going to use that word, is the scientific revolution. That is the commonality. Is that way of life and that outlook that is very much European and has crossed over even into
And
here.
that's when
So the Enlightenment, okay, I don't know that I'd say that either, because scientific revolutions have occurred, I mean, all over the place. Discovering something new is not inherent to skin color, but I'm not quite sure what he means. As far as history is concerned, I don't know. I'm not getting that one.
one of the things that Du Bois wanted to make a point about, because what it does is it ends up wiping out distinctive histories, languages, and so forth in favor of just sort of one conception of the world. Right?
Yeah, which is what you've been pushing this whole time. You just tried to make a distinction between white people and black people, where white people are, they have no culture, they have no commonality, they're all over the place. But black people, oh, well, they obviously have all these connections. And then you have this guy from Africa tell you, no, that doesn't work. And which is it?
This notion that everybody is fundamentally the same and they're all just like, well, white people.
Which is what you've been pushing, is that there's a common connection, a common privilege, a common unworthiness or something. I mean, everybody on that panel is telling us that all white people possess certain characteristics that will forever damn them in society. You just...
I mean, at core, the ideal is the white ideal, and we can get this from science.
It's science. Trust the science.
Everything else is a sort of falling away of that same ideal. So you're right. I mean, this is one for him, one of the clear commonalities. This sense of Enlightenment science and so forth is a way of getting rid of the differences that make for the diversity that we experience. Right?
What? Okay. I'm honestly just bewildered as to what was being said here. Science is the common thread of white people or white culture. There is no science in other cultures or races. Mathematics wasn't. What?
So yeah.
No. You're trying to get away from actually having to engage with this guy. You're not. He has laid for you an obvious real world contradiction to what you're putting out there. You're holding up Du Bois as a voice of reason. That your entire presentation was telling us of the wisdom of Du Bois. This guy asks you, do you actually believe in Du Bois's teachings because they don't make any sense to me? And you're just waving it off. And he counters your entire world. Oh, sorry, Du Bois's entire worldview. But the question still remains, do you believe what Du Bois is saying? But it sounds like you don't. Then why do you hold up his book as valuable? Did you spend any time during the course of your presentation contradicting Du Bois? Did you provide any real exceptions to what he was saying? It's been a couple of weeks, but I don't recall that you spent any significant amount of time putting any doubt into what Du Bois is saying, instead holding him on high as an authority. But you're challenged by it, and you just literally wave your hand and just try to back away. Look at his body language. He's backing away. He leaned back in his chair trying to get away from this confrontation. Look how scared he looks. Trying to pass it along. He doesn't know what to do. He has no idea what to do or what to say. He just babbles for a couple of seconds, says he agrees with the person, and then runs. It is something else. Won't even look at the kid.
Hey everybody, I want to say I'm not racist at all. Some of my best friends are white, as a matter of fact. Yeah. Anyway, real briefly, I just wanted to discuss a couple of experiences that I had growing up, just to let you know kind of how deep color is ingrained in our culture. When I grew up, I really wanted long hair, right? And I went to the point where I would put all these crazy chemicals in my hair.
And by the way, as the sound fluctuates here, I couldn't do anything about this. Now, I didn't listen to this ahead of time, but when I'm putting things together, I can see the peaks and the valleys of the audio. And there were some points at which I just couldn't peak them up anymore without making things terrible. So it is what it is, just so you know. It's not that's not me. That's just the way this was filmed and recorded.
To try to make it straight. My brother, who is Dr. Rosick's color, right, wanted to even be lighter than he was, and we caught him bathing himself in Clorox, right? My sister, who's like your complexion, she imagined herself as a white girl named Stephanie, right? One time when I was in Maryland, I was doing door-to-door sales, and I had these black study guides, right? And I started, I kind of rounded up these kids, and I was trying to give them some Black history, and there must have been 20, 25 of them there. And one of the kids said, well, when you look at the media, when you look at the magazine, when you look at all the movies, when you look in the billboards, right? So all you see, is white people. She says that's how we know God is white.
Wow, that's some crazy shit right there.
And I was like, wow, man, that's really deep. That's really heavy.
Yeah, that's deep and heavy. It's okay. And also, I feel bad for your, what do you say, sister who tried to bathe herself in Clorox?
And when I moved, when I came here, and I was surprised, I guess the one Black Studies professor had moved on. He got a better position, I guess, at UC Berkeley or something like that. But there's really, there's not a lot of Black Studies classes here. Just even my few interactions, I remember the Black Student Union was having a function, and I invited some of my neighbors to go. And so me, I'm used to being the odd man out in my classes, and they were like, well, well, we're going to be like the only two white guys at this, at this dance. I mean, what, there's no way I'm going to go. And I'm like, come on, man, we're going to show you love. It's no big deal. And, I was surprised at how much kind of fear and reticence there was, or hesitance there was at coming to this function.
Golly, I can't imagine why that might be if you're talking about Eugene, Oregon, and this particular through line, where we're told over and over again that everybody needs to be categorized and separated by race, that there are distinct differences because of race, that white people are inherently bad and or inherently thought of as bad by anybody who isn't white, because white people are the oppressors and the enemy, which we are told over and over again. And by we, I mean people, not just white people. Over and over again, people are told that they are victims for their skin color just as well as they are oppressors for their skin color. Why would these people have felt uncomfortable going to a quote-unquote black dance? I can't imagine. So again, I ask, how is any of this education actually helping to improve race relations? And instead is not just enforcing the idea that there is a separation that shall never be breached because of melanin count.
And real briefly, I wanted to kind of close with these 2 points. There is a really deep divide within American culture. One example that I spoke about last week that me and my friends are really wrestling with for the longest time was growing up in the 80s was the crack cocaine explosion that hit America. And within, all across within the Black community, there was this, and in the Hispanic community, the Black community, we knew that, where was this influx of drugs? Where was it? Where was this coming from? And,
the CIA. I mean, to some degree, it was the CIA. Look it up.
All of us within the community, we were all kind of pointing our fingers at something's going on, fishing in the White House, right? And it's one thing, our pastors believed it, our leaders believed it, my grandparents, uncles, right? Everyone kind of had this feeling that our communities were being targeted by the drug trade, right? And
well, targeted by the drug trade, sure. Desperate people. I mean, alcohol. The alcohol industry thrives on, people who want to drink, and it's more of a class thing than it is a race thing. But okay.
And it, no one really listened to us until Mike Rupert, and that there was another. I can't remember the name of the reporter that broke it for the Mercury Sun, but it was sometime in '97.
Is there? I'm sorry. Is there like a question coming somewhere? Or are we just like going off on your doctoral thesis or whatever?
When the story broke down in South Central Los Angeles, and for us in the Black community, it was to kind of have finally some validation that this monstrosity was going on in our community was refreshing. But to this day, it sounds so outrageous, right? Even now, to mention that our communities are being targeted by the drug trade, but there's pretty much a consensus within the Black community that that's the reality of it. And
okay, targeted by the drug trade, but who was actually selling the drugs? Who was making the choice to get involved? I mean, it comes down to the individual. You can give somebody the opportunity. They don't need to necessarily take it. Do you want to sell drugs? Yes or no? Are you in a desperate enough situation to sell drugs? Can I take advantage of your desperation? Sure. Is that a race thing or is that just a class thing? I don't know, but there's a line where placing the blame kind of has to, when does it stop? Yeah, okay, the CIA brought in the drugs. People decided to take part, make the money, or do the damage. And then desperate people take the drugs to escape their reality, get hooked on them, and so on. There's no harps or halos here. But, okay.
Number two, The second point is Bush's, election or his selection, right? First time around, everyone in the Black community felt like,
Wait, did George W. Bush, or we talking about Papa Bush? I'm assuming George W. Bush at this time.
we had deeply been let down, especially by the Senate. We couldn't, there wasn't one person in the Senate, not one, who would back the Black Congress, right?
What? There was not one person in the Senate who would back the Black Congress. What?
And asked for a recount of votes, that were ignored.
What?
And
oh wait, election disparities. What? Where are we right now? You know where we're at right now? We're 25 minutes into the second hour, and I'm just about at my my limit. I'll try to let this student finish his question before I wrap things up, because if we're going to get to it.
So now we find ourselves in a situation where, in our communities, the schools are completely segregated. There's so many more.
Just wait a
Blacks
couple of
and
years.
Hispanics, that are in prison, that are in, that are in higher education. There's no money that's being funneled in our schools. And
What?
when I was discussing some of this with the reality of COINTELPRO and so on and so forth with some of my white friends.
COINTELPRO? Oh yeah, no, that's a whole thing. Yeah, that's a whole thing that happened.
The reality of kind of like of what the Panthers were doing and so on and so forth, and
So on and so
some of the
forth.
civil rights leaders who were trying to better the situation,
And
who had gotten marginalized or assassinated or exiled and so on and so forth. The idea is that, well, you guys kind of brought this on yourselves, right?
What?
And so it still seems like there's
What?
a huge divide, and I don't even know where to begin to kind of tackle this. But it is good to see different folks here coming out and beginning this dialogue. But
Is there a dialogue? I just hear a whole bunch of monologuing.
I just wanted to kind of address those those really serious pertinent issues that I think
What?
is on our community, and that I do not expect the media or Hollywood to address these issues. It's not their job
What?
to me, to address those issues. So, but it's good that we're having this discourse. So, I just wanted to say that.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. That was something, so on and so forth. Okay, well, there you have it, everyone. Part 3 of the Oregon State University 2010 panel discussing critical race theory. We're now into question time. And so far, the only question that's been asked wasn't answered, was dodged very pointedly. Well, not even pointedly, it was kind of roundabout. But man, the students take the cake compared to the teachers on this stuff. Save for the student from Nigeria. I mean, he had an actual question, and he actually offered a counterpoint to what the teacher, I say teacher, abstractly, was saying. And we saw his response and just completely dancing around, having to address the notion that Du Bois is wrong, or Du Bois was an ideologue, or anything else. And then we have these two other students who are, I am guessing, Americans through and through. It's all over the place, especially that first girl. And who knows where our first student is now, or our third student, or our second student. Who knows what they're doing now? I wonder what kind of careers they've got, especially the first girl. I'd be curious to know. But I'll give a couple minutes here for anything anybody else wants to say. If you have any comments, questions, and so on. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything previous. Just a note, I will pick this up again with a part 4 next Sunday. I think I'll be around next Sunday. Should be. But I'll let you guys know as the week proceeds. Let's see. Cephtus Wolf, this isn't a discussion, it's a sermon. Well, at least on the part of the panel, and certainly on the part of that first student who was a true believer in whatever it was that she said. So, yeah. Let's see. And Zero the Hero, question time more like monologue. So far, I mean, save for the Nigerian student. He actually had a question and actually engaged with the professor, which we saw the result of that, which was something else. Let's see. Maniac Man took a third party's observation to blow away Du Bois's bullshit. I mean, I was waiting for the professor's counterpoint. Like I said, he spent the entirety of his time reciting, praising, and holding aloft Du Bois's work. And at the first notion that that's challenged, he doesn't know what to do, has absolutely no idea what to do, and goes round and around and around. And he runs right into the wall of making vast declarations about the realities of what connects people on the basis of race. He says, well, white people are like this, which is completely unlike black people. Really? And then the guy comes back and says, well, you know, I live in Africa. I'm from Nigeria, 150 million people, and there's not a lot of connection one place to another, one country to another, different languages, different customs. And the guy's like, oh, he doesn't know what to do with that. What do you do? I mean, doesn't your skin color unite you as all one thing? Let's see. Parody Bear, examine through the lens of drunken race goggles. I mean, they're drunk on self-pity, a lot of them, especially that last lady. Like I say, of all the panelists so far, our last speaker, I feel the most sorry for, because she sounds like a victim, you know, a victim of someone putting onto her a guilt trip. But, you know, it's the line between being victimized and then turning around and victimizing others, you know, the vicious circle. Now she engages in leading workshops to tell white people why they're just as bad as she is. It's nasty, nasty business. So anyway, everyone, I'm going to call it there. For time stamp purposes, I am at 28:33 on this video. This is actually just the second portion of the 2-hour talk that we're into now. So about halfway through the end of the presentation. So we might be able to finish this off next week on part 4. Yeah, this is just more, again, like I said last week, a lot of this stuff sounds very familiar. Not a whole lot on the basis of argumentation and or logic has changed since 2010. And at the same time, the thing I find more astounding is just the individual stories and the individual perspectives on how they came to this revelation, how they proceed through the world, how they see other people as individuals. Because I can't tell by looking at somebody what they think or how they behave. I didn't know what the lady at the end of the panel there was going to say or how she was going to enlighten us on her perspective until she said it. Same thing with the students. What could I have assumed would come out of the mouths of some students versus others? I don't know. But our panel would want you to think that you can make those assessments, that you can know ahead of time the character and the lifestyle and the beliefs and the culture of someone simply on the basis of looking at them. I mean, if you need any other evidence to that, look at the reaction to Professor Greycoat when the Nigerian student reminded him that not everybody in Africa thinks just because they're black. He had no idea where to go. He was so desperate to get away from that. You could see it in his face, in his voice, in his body language. He had nowhere to go. Very revealing. And that alone might have been worth the price of admission. But with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining me again for this part 3 of this series. We'll probably finish it up with part 4. I might go longer next week just to finish it up rather than have some kind of like, you know, tail end stay out there for too long. If you have any other questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. If you'd like to hear more from me or Satsu 2 Cents, you can find the both of us tomorrow night, Monday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for the Lords of the Night, where we will go over the news of the day, news stories you submit, what we've been up to on the internet, and then your questions and comments. And if you'd like to see something similar along these lines that I do every Thursday, you can watch TED Excellence, where I take a J-random TEDx talk whose title makes me curious, and I just listen to it and react to it and find out something new, hopefully, or just be flabbergasted by whatever I'm being told, if you can believe it. Everyone, thank you again for joining me. Moderators, thank you so much for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do, except on those rare occasions, like the other night on Lords of the Night, but that's a whole other story. And everybody who donated, thank you so much for your generosity. I really do appreciate it. Everyone, I hope you are all better enlightened now, as I am, kind of. I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and have a great rest of your Sunday. Bye, guys.